Hi everyone. Book Summary: Words That Hurt, Words That Heal, How to Choose Words Wisely and Well, by Joseph Telushkin. Let's enjoy the video. Please subscribing to my channel for more great content like this. You'll be notified when I upload new videos. Words That Hurt, Words That Heal, How to Choose Words Wisely and Well is a book by Rabbi Joseph Telushkin that focuses on the power of words. Telushkin is renowned for his warmth, erudition, and richly anecdotal insights. He explains the harm we do when we spread gossip, teaches why anger, criticism, and lying destroy any possibility of true communication, and shows how to turn every exchange into an opportunity. The book is divided into several parts, each focusing on a different aspect of how words can hurt or heal. The first part, The Power of Words to Hurt, discusses the harm in spreading gossip, rumors, or others' secrets, and how unfair anger, excessive criticism, or lying undermines true communication. The second part, How We Speak About Others, delves into the damage inflicted by gossip and the lure of it. The third part, How We Speak to Others, covers topics such as controlling rage and anger, fighting fairly, and how to criticize and accept rebuke. The fourth part, The Power of Words to Heal, extols the virtues of words that heal. Here are 5 keys from the book. 1. Telushkin presents the case of Oliver Sipple, who saved President Ford's life in 1975. The author maintains that Sipple was cut off from his family and drank himself to death after the papers exposed him as a homosexual. 2. He offers several harrowing examples of people scarred for life by childhood verbal assaults. 3. He discusses the concept of negative truths or outright slander as a prelude to murder, whether issued by a government propaganda office or against a rapper. 4. He talks about feminist misinformation about 150,000 annual deaths from anorexia as an example of what he calls the macro lie. 5. He advises that when catching a child in a lie, we should mention the mistruth but not brand the child a liar. Introduction. In his lectures across the country, Telushkin challenges his audience to go for 24 hours without uttering any unkind words about or to anyone. He compares the inability to control one's tongue to the struggles faced by alcoholics and nicotine addicts. He argues that if one cannot refrain from speaking unkindly for a day, they have lost control over their tongue. Telushkin addresses the common objection that the harm caused by words is not comparable to the damage caused by substances like alcohol and nicotine. He asserts that unless one has been a victim of severe physical violence, the worst pains they have experienced likely stem from cruel words. These could be in the form of ego-destroying criticism, excessive anger, sarcasm, public humiliation, hurtful nicknames, betrayal of secrets, rumors, and malicious gossip. He also discusses the tendency of people to talk negatively about others who are not present, and encourages his readers to monitor their conversations for 2 days, noting every time they say something negative about someone who isn't present. Telushkin compares the tongue to an arrow, explaining that once an arrow is shot, it cannot be returned, no matter how much one wants to. Similarly, cruel words, once spoken, cannot be fully taken back. He equates cruel words to murder, as they can inflict devastating and irrevocable suffering. Just as a murderer cannot restore his victim to life, one who damages another's reputation through malicious gossip or public humiliation can never fully undo the damage. The author shares a personal anecdote where his daughter Naomi replicates her mother's impatient tone and words when her younger sister starts crying. This incident highlights the impact of our words and actions on those around us, especially children. He discusses the power of words to heal and inspire, referencing a medieval Jewish text, the Orhat Tzaddikim, The Ways of the Righteous, which states that with the tongue, one can also perform limitless acts of virtue. In a later incident, Naomi uses comforting words with her younger sister, demonstrating that she has learned from her mother's compassionate reassurance. Chapter 1: The Unrecognized Power of Words begins with a tale about a man who slandered a rabbi in a small Eastern European town. Feeling remorseful, the man sought forgiveness from the rabbi, who instructed him to scatter the feathers of a pillow to the wind and then try to gather them all back. The impossibility of this task served as a metaphor for the irreparable damage caused by slanderous words. The author then discusses how words define our place in the world and shape our reputation. He cites President Andrew Jackson's statement about the lasting disgrace caused by slander. He also emphasizes the Jewish tradition's view of words as tangible and powerful, akin to God's creation of the world through words. Telushkin points out that while the power of words may seem obvious, most people use them lightly, choosing their clothes more carefully than their words. He stresses the importance of ethical speech and likens the handling of words to handling a loaded gun. The author shares the tale of a man who slandered a rabbi, illustrating the irreversible damage caused by slanderous words. He cites President Andrew Jackson's statement about the lasting disgrace caused by slander, highlighting the long-term impact of harmful words on a person's reputation. He discusses the Jewish tradition's view of words as tangible and powerful, drawing a parallel between God's creation of the world through words and human beings' ability to create with words. He mentions the psychiatrist Antonio Wood's observation that speaking ill of someone leads to self-alienation, which is a major cause of depression. He provides examples of unfair and cruel speech in society, such as Rush Limbaugh's labeling of feminists as feminazis, G. Gordon Liddy's advice to aim for the head of invading federal ATF agents, and Senator Ted Kennedy's misleading statement about Robert Bork's America. Chapter 2: The irrevocable damage inflicted by gossip begins with a Talmudic tale contrasting the perspectives of a good guest and a bad guest at a party. This tale serves as a metaphor for ethical speech, highlighting how people often focus on others' flaws rather than their good qualities. It underscores the human tendency to engage in gossip, which Telushkin equates to being a bad guest. Telushkin then discusses the biblical injunction against talebearing, gossip, which forms the foundation of Jewish teachings on ethical speech. He notes that the commandment against talebearing appears just before the famous biblical law, love your neighbor as yourself, emphasizing the importance of ethical speech in maintaining harmonious relationships. The author acknowledges the ambiguity of the term talebearing in the biblical context, raising questions about what constitutes gossip. He suggests that Jewish teachers, starting from the early centuries of the Common Era, elaborated on the biblical law and identified 3 types of speech to be avoided or minimized. 1. Non-defamatory information and comments about others that are true. 2. Negative, though true, stories, lashon hara in Hebrew, that lower the esteem in which people hold the person being talked about. A subset of this is tattling, rechilat in Hebrew, which involves telling someone the critical things another person said about them. 3. Lies and rumors, matzi shem ra in Hebrew, that are negative and false. Non-defamatory and true remarks. Begins with an example of a seemingly innocuous comment about a party and a renovated kitchen. However, Telushkin points out that such comments can lead to feelings of exclusion or resentment in the listener. He further argues that seemingly innocent gossip rarely remains so, as conversations about others often veer towards criticism and negativity. The author then discusses the biblical story of Job, where God's praise of Job in Satan's presence leads to Job's suffering. This story illustrates the potential harm that can result from praise, especially when it brings someone into the spotlight or incites envy or animosity in others. Telushkin also discusses the case of Oliver Sipple, a national hero who saved President Gerald Ford's life. Despite Sipple's request for privacy, the press publicized his involvement in gay causes, leading to a rupture in his relationship with his family and his eventual death. This case demonstrates the potential harm that can result from the public's and the press's curiosity, even when the initial intent was to praise or celebrate someone. The example of a seemingly innocuous comment about a party and a renovated kitchen, illustrating how such comments can lead to feelings of exclusion or resentment in the listener. The discussion on how seemingly innocent gossip often veers towards criticism and negativity, highlighting the potential harm in discussing others' lives. The biblical story of Job, illustrating the potential harm that can result from praise, especially when it brings someone into the spotlight or incites envy or animosity in others. The case of Oliver Sipple, demonstrating the potential harm that can result from the public's and the press's curiosity, even when the initial intent was to praise or celebrate someone. The postmortem comment from the Los Angeles Times reporter who publicized Sipple's homosexuality, expressing regret for the harm caused by the publication of Sipple's private life. Negative truths, lashon hara. begins by contrasting the common belief that there's nothing morally wrong with spreading negative information about others as long as it's true, with the Jewish law's view that such behavior, known as lashon hara or negative truths, is a serious offense. Jewish law forbids spreading negative truths about anyone unless the person to whom you are speaking needs the information. Telushkin explains that the context and intention behind a statement can determine whether it's a compliment, non-defamatory gossip, or lashon hara. For example, praising a person with limited funds for donating $100 to a charity would likely raise the person's stature, while saying the same about a wealthy individual might diminish respect for them. The author points out that many people are not deterred from speaking negative truths, often because such gossip is interesting. He notes that this behavior violates the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Telushkin also discusses the concept of avak lashon hara or the dust of lashon hara, which refers to nonverbal techniques or innuendos that lower another person's status. He provides examples of such behavior, including making a face when someone's name is mentioned, rolling one's eyes, winking, or speaking sarcastically. The discussion of lashon hara or negative truths in Jewish law, highlighting the moral implications of spreading negative information about others, even if it's true. The explanation of how the context and intention behind a statement can determine whether it's a compliment, non-defamatory gossip, or lashon hara. The observation that many people are not deterred from speaking negative truths, often because such gossip is interesting. The mention of the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, as a standard that is often violated in the context of gossip. The discussion of avak lashon hara or the dust of lashon hara, which refers to nonverbal techniques or innuendos that lower another person's status. When gossip is falsely attributed to you. The importance of denying false rumors that attribute unkind words to you. If such a rumor circulates and it isn't true, you must make this known to both the person involved and others. If you don't, the person slandered will remain justifiably hurt and angry. Telushkin illustrates this point with two contrasting examples. The first involves Winston Churchill, who was falsely attributed with a witty but cruel comment about Clement Attlee. When confronted with this, Churchill firmly denied making such a remark and expressed his strong disapproval of anyone who would. The second example involves a former congresswoman and New York's one-time mayor Ed Koch. The congresswoman was quoted in a newspaper article saying she would hate the thought of spending a week with Koch. Koch, unaware of any falling out between them, was incensed and confused. When the congresswoman later called Koch to solicit his support for her U.S. Senate run, Koch reminded her of her previous remarks and pointed out that she had taken no steps to correct the record or apologize. Telushkin concludes this section by emphasizing that if a cruel statement is attributed to you but you didn't make it, even more aggressive action is required. People don't forget cruel words directed against them or someone they love. If you're accused of having uttered such words, your only hope for making peace is to deny them forcefully and immediately, both privately and publicly if they are untrue, and to apologize in the same manner if they are. The emphasis on the importance of denying false rumors that attribute unkind words to you. The example of Winston Churchill, who firmly denied a witty but cruel comment falsely attributed to him. The contrasting example of a former congresswoman who was quoted in a newspaper article making a negative comment about Ed Koch, and who later failed to correct the record or apologize. The point that people don't forget cruel words directed against them or someone they love. The conclusion that if you're accused of having uttered cruel words that you didn't actually say, you must deny them forcefully and immediately, and apologize if necessary. Tattling, rechilet, and rumors. Begins by defining tattling or rechilet as a subdivision of lashon hara, which involves telling others negative comments people have made about them. Telushkin illustrates this with a personal anecdote where a woman's sister repeated a remark made by their uncle about her, which had a devastating impact on their relationship. The author then discusses the common justification offered by people who transmit hurtful comments, arguing that while it may seem unarguable in theory, in practice it often provides a totally false impression. He emphasizes that almost all of us have said hurtful things about people we otherwise love dearly, and questions how many of us would appreciate our loved ones hearing every remark that we've ever made about them. Telushkin also discusses the concept of rumors, using the example of reporter Bob Woodward, who reported the accusation of a retired Air Force sergeant who claimed to have witnessed Senator John Tower publicly drunk and fondling two women at an Army base. This report led many readers to conclude that Senator Tower was both morally and emotionally unfit to be a cabinet member. However, Woodward later learned that his source was a severely disturbed individual who had made up the story. Chapter 3: The Lure of Gossip. A Talmudic parable where all the world's animals confront the snake, questioning the pleasure it derives from poisoning and killing a human being. The snake retorts by asking about the pleasure humans derive from spreading malicious gossip. This sets the stage for the discussion on the motivations behind gossip. Telushkin argues that while most wrongful acts are driven by self-interest, gossips gain by hurting other people's reputations. The benefits derived from spreading malicious gossip may be intangible, but they are real. The primary reason we gossip is to raise our status by lowering the status of others. There's a psychological gratification in seeing someone else's social status decline. The author also discusses the enjoyment derived from seeing a come down for those who summon us to a morally upright life. He cites the example of a clergyman caught in a scandal, who finds himself the subject of particularly nasty and unrelenting gossip. Another way we seek to elevate ourselves is by retailing inside information about others, so that we'll be perceived as being in the know. This motive for gossip is already apparent in children and adolescents. For example, teenage girls get status by being friends with high-status girls, and one way to prove this friendship is to show that they know their secrets. The author also discusses the enjoyment derived from seeing a come down for those who summon us to a morally upright life. He cites the example of a clergyman caught in a scandal, who finds himself the subject of particularly nasty and unrelenting gossip. Another way we seek to elevate ourselves is by retailing inside information about others, so that we'll be perceived as being in the know. This motive for gossip is already apparent in children and adolescents. For example, teenage girls get status by being friends with high-status girls, and one way to prove this friendship is to show that they know their secrets. Yet another reason we speak ill of others is to exact revenge against people who have wronged us but whom we are too timid to confront. It's natural to have this impulse, for if we complain to the offending party, we risk being hurt again by her response. We can easily find consolation, as well as justification for our anger, when others share our feelings about the offense and the offender. Telushkin suggests that if you're going to gossip, you should severely limit the number of people with whom you gossip and the amount of time you spend in such talk. If you or your partner learn something unusual, possibly negative, about a mutual friend, you will probably relate it to each other, and perhaps one or two close friends. But make sure that you stop there. Chapter 4: When, if ever, is it appropriate to reveal information that will humiliate or harm another? Begins by stating that Jewish law compares spreading humiliating or harmful information to shedding blood, an act which is normally wrong. However, there are specific cases where transmitting negative truths is permitted, such as when asked for a business reference or when someone is romantically involved with a person known to be inappropriate. The author then discusses the moral complexities that arise when an individual good clashes with a societal good. For instance, if a school psychologist learns that a student is using illegal drugs, should they inform the child's parents? While involving the parents might ultimately prove beneficial to the child, the disclosure of confidential information might prevent other students from confiding in the psychologist, thereby preventing them from being treated at all. Telushkin also discusses the tragic case of Tatiana Tarasov, a University of California at Berkeley student, who was murdered by a man named Prosenjit Potter because she had rebuffed his romantic advances. After his arrest, it was revealed that Potter had confided to his psychologist, Dr. Lawrence Moore, his intention to murder Tarasov when she returned from her summer vacation. The psychologist had taken Potter's threats so seriously that he informed campus police, who in turn detained Potter for questioning. However, they released him when he appeared to be acting rationally. At that point, Moore's superior, Dr. Harvey Powelson, directed him to desist from further action regarding the case, so that Moore never contacted Tarasov to warn her about the danger. the majority of judges ruled that while doctor-patient confidentiality normally must be safeguarded, this privileged relationship should be breached when it puts an innocent person in serious danger. The author then discusses the moral complexities that arise when an individual's safety clashes with the need for professional confidentiality. He suggests that the best way to assess such threats is for the therapist to personalize them, to imagine that the violent sentiments are directed toward themselves or toward a loved one. If the therapist feels fearful when personalizing the threat, they should be morally obliged to inform the potential victim and the authorities. The text also discusses the ethics of clergy-client confidentiality, using examples from Alfred Hitchcock's classic film I Confess and Father William Kienzle's best-selling murder mystery The Rosary Murders. In both cases, a man confesses to a priest that he has committed a murder, but the priest is forbidden by Catholic law from informing the police about the confession. In contrast, Jewish law is far less categorical. The author discusses a case where a rabbi went to the police after a man confessed to him that he might have stabbed his wife. The man was later arrested and convicted of the murder of his wife. The author concludes that while people generally have the right to expect a doctor, psychologist, clergy person, or lawyer to safeguard their secrets, this right is cancelled when a higher good, the protection of innocent life, is concerned. Chapter 5: Privacy and Public Figures. The text begins by questioning whether public figures, especially those we trust to lead us, should be considered a special case when it comes to privacy. Many journalists argue that any activity a person engages in can reveal significant information about their character, and thus, the voting public has the right to know it all. However, the author argues that it is morally unjustifiable to deny public officials a private life, as it denies them both intimate relationships and an internal life. The author then discusses whether intrusive investigations lead voters to select better qualified, more ethical candidates. He argues that 20 years of muckraking, much of it centered on candidates' private lives, hasn't led to the election of more capable and/or more honest people. Its primary achievement has been to make Americans more cynical and less trusting than ever of their elected leaders. The text also discusses the sexual indiscretions of public figures like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Richard Nixon, and John F. Kennedy. The author argues that a president's marital infidelity should be made public knowledge only if it relates to the job for which the individual is running. Negative information that is related to the person's job performance should be made known. Negative information that is unrelated to job performance should not. Discusses the ethics of clergy-client confidentiality, using examples from Alfred Hitchcock's classic film I Confess and Father William Kienzle's best-selling murder mystery The Rosary Murders. In both cases, a man confesses to a priest that he has committed a murder, but the priest is forbidden by Catholic law from informing the police about the confession. In contrast, Jewish law is far less categorical. The author discusses a case where a rabbi went to the police after a man confessed to him that he might have stabbed his wife. The man was later arrested and convicted of the murder of his wife. The author concludes that while people generally have the right to expect a doctor, psychologist, clergy person, or lawyer to safeguard their secrets, this right is cancelled when a higher good, the protection of innocent life, is concerned. Chapter 6: Controlling Rage and Anger. The biblical story of David and Michal, whose marriage became one of the saddest in the Bible due to their inability to control their words when they were angry. This led to a brutal exchange of words that ended their intimacy and love. The author emphasizes that the ability to control what we say when we're angry is a prerequisite for a lasting relationship. The author then challenges the modern belief that it's unhealthy to suppress rage. He argues that feeling rage does not entitle one to inflict emotional pain on others any more than feelings of sexual attraction entitle one to rape the source of one's attraction. Even when anger is justified, all that it justifies is expressing anger proportionate to the provocation. If it is disproportionate, it is unfair, unjust, and hence morally wrong. The text also discusses the self-destructive nature of rage, using the example of Moses from the Book of Numbers. Moses, in his anger, disobeyed God's command and struck a rock to get water for the Israelites, instead of speaking to it as God had instructed. This act of rage cost Moses his entry into the Promised Land. The foolish appearance that often accompanies loss of temper, using the example of actor Michael Caine. Caine recalls an incident where he lost his temper on a film set, and the director sat him down and talked to him about the Japanese theory of losing face. This conversation led Caine to never lose his temper in a work situation again. An anecdote from a friend of the author's wife, who has long struggled with his temper, emphasizing the importance of controlling rage. The author argues that while human beings may have little control over what provokes their anger, they usually can control how they express their anger. The author then discusses the self-destructive nature of rage, using examples from psychologist Richard Gels and psychiatrist Dr. Stephen Marmer. Gels tells of a marriage counselor who was interviewing a man who often physically abused his wife. The man claimed he couldn't control himself, but when asked why he didn't shoot or stab his wife, he had no response, indicating that he did have control over his actions. Dr. Marmer recommends thinking in terms of layers, or cascades, of control when dealing with anger. The author concludes by discussing the foolish appearance that often accompanies loss of temper, using the example of actor Michael Caine. Caine recalls an incident where he lost his temper on a film set, and the director sat him down and talked to him about the Japanese theory of losing face. This conversation led Caine to never lose his temper in a work situation again. Chapter 7 Fighting Fair. A Talmudic story about Rabbi Yochanan and Resh Lakish, a former gladiator and bandit who became one of Israel's leading scholars under Yochanan's tutelage. However, a disagreement over a highly technical religious matter led to a heated argument, during which Yochanan sarcastically referred to Resh Lakish's past as a robber. This personal attack escalated the argument, leading to Resh Lakish's illness and eventual death, and Yochanan's subsequent deep depression and death. The author uses this story to illustrate the importance of focusing on the issues at hand during an argument and refraining from using damaging personal information to invalidate the other person's contentions. He emphasizes that an inability to follow this simple rule often transforms moderate arguments into angry quarrels, leading to ruptures between friends and close family members. The author also discusses the common pattern in quarrels that rip families apart and destroy friendships, where minor matters escalate into major disputes due to the intimacy of the relationship, providing the adversaries with destructive information that they could use against each other. The text concludes with the ancient Hebrew proverb, "Hatred makes a straight line crooked," illustrating how anger can distort reason and lead to terrible words and actions. The author argues that even if one feels justified in their anger, they should only express anger proportionate to the provocation. Chapter 7 Fighting Fair. A Talmudic story about Rabbi Yochanan and Resh Lakish, a former gladiator and bandit who became one of Israel's leading scholars under Yochanan's tutelage. However, a disagreement over a highly technical religious matter led to a heated argument, during which Yochanan sarcastically referred to Resh Lakish's past as a robber. This personal attack escalated the argument, leading to Resh Lakish's illness and eventual death, and Yochanan's subsequent deep depression and death. The author uses this story to illustrate the importance of focusing on the issues at hand during an argument and refraining from using damaging personal information to invalidate the other person's contentions. He emphasizes that an inability to follow this simple rule often transforms moderate arguments into angry quarrels, leading to ruptures between friends and close family members. The author also discusses the common pattern in quarrels that rip families apart and destroy friendships, where minor matters escalate into major disputes due to the intimacy of the relationship, providing the adversaries with destructive information that they could use against each other. Ancient Hebrew proverb, "Hatred makes a straight line crooked," illustrating how anger can distort reason and lead to terrible words and actions. The author argues that even if one feels justified in their anger, they should only express anger proportionate to the provocation. Every year, numerous families are torn apart and close friendships are broken due to parties refusing to fight fairly in disputes. In a disagreement with someone, individuals have the right to state their case, express their opinion, explain why they think the other party is wrong, and even make clear how passionately they feel about the subject at hand. However, these are the only rights they have. They do not have a moral right to undercut their adversary's position by invalidating them personally. It is unethical to dredge up past information about the person and use it against them. Despite this, People routinely engage in such behavior, then become furious when the other person breaks off contact or fights back with similar arguments. Words have consequences, and if they are used to hurt people, the victims will find ways to retaliate. The author uses the example of Rabbi Yochanan and Resh Lakish to illustrate this point. The key to avoiding such bitterness in life is to learn how to fight ethically. Chapter 8: How to Criticize, and How to Accept Rebuke. A Talmudic teaching that emphasizes the responsibility one has to prevent sin in their household, city, and the world. It then presents the biblical story of the prophet Nathan, who provides a model of effective reproach. When King David commits adultery and arranges for the woman's husband to die in battle, Nathan confronts him in private. Instead of directly accusing David, Nathan tells a story about a rich man who takes a poor man's beloved lamb. When David expresses outrage at the rich man's actions, Nathan reveals that David is the rich man in the story. This indirect approach forces David to acknowledge his wrongdoing. The Torah's commandment to reprove one's kinsman but not to incur guilt because of him. This commandment is interpreted in two ways: one must speak up to prevent another's destructive behavior, and one must not reprove another in a demeaning or humiliating way. The goal should be to criticize in a way that inflicts the minimum of hurt while doing the maximum of good. An anecdote about Isaac Asimov, a prolific author who was deeply hurt by harsh criticism from his writing teacher. Despite the pain, Asimov took the criticism to heart and improved his writing. However, the incident left a lasting impact on him, illustrating the potential harm of tactless and wounding words. The author then provides 3 questions to ask oneself before offering criticism. How do I feel about offering this criticism? Does it give me pleasure or pain? Does my criticism offer specific ways to change? Are my words non-threatening and reassuring? He emphasizes that criticism should be offered in a way that inflicts the minimum of hurt while doing the maximum of good. The importance of focusing on specific incidents during criticism and avoiding blanket statements that demoralize the person being criticized. Critics who use words such as always or never compel their listeners to react defensively, which is psychologically damaging and unethical. The effectiveness of nonverbal criticism, using the example of the 19th century Hasidic Rabbi Israel of Vishnitz. The rabbi wished to affect the behavior of a certain banker and knew that a frontal critique would backfire. Instead, he used nonverbal cues to express his criticism, illustrating that sometimes criticism is most eloquent when not expressed in words. A story about Rabbi Israel of Vishnitz, who used a unique approach to criticize a wealthy bank manager. Instead of directly criticizing the manager for not helping a penniless widow, the rabbi visited the manager's house and refrained from speaking about the issue. This indirect approach sparked the manager's curiosity and eventually led him to pay the widow's debt out of his own pocket. The challenges of accepting rebuke. When criticized, many people tend to deny or minimize the faults being pointed out, blame others, or insist that they cannot change. The author argues that even if the critic possesses the flaws they accuse the other person of, it doesn't invalidate their criticism if what they say about the person is true. The text also discusses the importance of focusing on specific incidents during criticism and avoiding blanket statements that demoralize the person being criticized. Critics who use words such as always or never compel their listeners to react defensively, which is psychologically damaging and unethical. Conclusion by sharing an anecdote about a friend who hosts a radio talk show. Despite passionately espousing often controversial political views, the friend makes it a point never to insult callers who dispute his positions. Instead, he listens carefully to what they say and always responds courteously. He reads every letter from his listeners, particularly those written by people who clearly abhor his views, and uses the criticism to grow and improve. Chapter 12: Words That Heal. A column by humorist Art Buchwald, which tells the story of a man who tries to bring love back to New York by expressing gratitude and admiration to people he encounters, such as taxi drivers and construction workers. His belief is that his kind words will spread goodwill and positively influence the attitudes of others. The author then discusses the healing potential of words and how they are often underused. He introduces the term emotional constipation to describe the inability to express love, gratitude, and caring, even when these emotions are felt. This inability is often due to unresolved anger, paralysis in the face of other people's needs, or a lack of imagination. The text also shares a haunting story told by Rabbi Jack Reamer about a mourning husband at a Jewish funeral who regrets not expressing his love to his wife when she was alive. This story to emphasize the importance of expressing love and gratitude to our loved ones while we still have the chance. The case of Ian O'Gorman, a 10-year-old boy diagnosed with cancer who had his head shaved due to chemotherapy. When he returned to school, he found that his classmates and teacher had also shaved their heads in a show of empathy. This act illustrates how the desire to ease someone else's pain can lead to powerful expressions of support and solidarity. The story of Leopold Pfefferberg, one of the 1,100 Jews saved by Oskar Schindler during the Holocaust. Pfefferberg promised Schindler that he would make his name known to the world. Despite numerous setbacks and rejections, Pfefferberg persisted in his efforts to share Schindler's story. His persistence paid off when Australian novelist Thomas Keneally agreed to write a book about Schindler, which was later adapted into the Academy Award-winning film Schindler's List. Pfefferberg's promise to Schindler was finally fulfilled, and both Keneally and Steven Spielberg, the director of the film, expressed their gratitude to Pfefferberg. The importance of expressing gratitude on a smaller scale in our daily lives. He cites teachings from the Talmud that emphasize the importance of expressing gratitude, even for small acts of kindness or learning. He also discusses the concept of Hakarat HaTov, which involves expressing gratitude for the services provided by others, such as taxi drivers, waitresses, and bank officials. A poem by Rabbi Reamer, which describes the regrets of a woman who realized too late how stingy she had been in sharing her gratitude. The poem serves as a reminder of the importance of expressing gratitude to our loved ones while we still have the chance. In short, the people nearest to us should not be taken for granted, or made to wait for special occasions to hear our gratitude. Conveying appreciation is something we must do repeatedly. If we don't, we are, quite simply, ingrates. Words of love. The words "I love you" should be used more often, especially by devoted parents and those involved in successful romantic relationships. The author acknowledges that many people either forget or neglect to say these words, possibly due to discomfort in expressing tender emotions. The author then shares a story from Deborah Tannen's bestseller, You Just Don't Understand, Women and Men in Conversation. The story is about Tannen's widowed great-aunt who, despite being in her 70s and having physical ailments, had a love affair with a man of the same age. The great-aunt felt deeply loved when her companion showed interest in her life, such as asking about her outfit during a dinner with friends. The text also discusses the right of people who care about us to know that they are loved. The author shares a story of a woman who knew her mother-in-law loved her, but wished for more explicit expressions of love, such as hugs, kisses, and compliments. The different ways love can be expressed, and how a considerate person will strive to show it in the way the recipient needs. He shares a quote from Professor Reuven Kimmelman, which emphasizes that the fulfillment of the commandment of love your neighbor as yourself is proven not by one's feeling of having done so, but by the neighbor's feeling of being loved. The story of Joe Lapchick, a pre-World War II basketball player, whose young son was stricken with polio. Despite the concerns of others about whether his son would ever be able to play basketball again, Lapchick expressed his desire for his son to have a happy and normal life, and to give something back to society. His son, freed from the pressure of having to follow in his father's footsteps, later recalled the profound impact of his father's words. The Jewish tradition's ways of expressing concern for those most in need, particularly people who've suffered the death of an immediate family member. The tradition instructs neighbors to have food prepared for the mourners when they return from the cemetery, and those who visit mourners during the week following a death are instructed to remain silent until the mourner speaks. The author emphasizes that ascertaining what someone needs allows us to give them what is most meaningful and is thus, perhaps, the highest expression of love. The importance of the phrase "I'm sorry" in healing the hurt that one might have caused someone. The author argues that apologizing means acknowledging that one has been wrong, perhaps even cruel. He shares that many feuds between siblings or close friends, which have lasted for years, could have been brought to an immediate end if only one side had said, "I'm sorry." An ancient Jewish teaching that a person who sincerely repents on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, will be forgiven for any sins he or she has committed against God. But the Day of Atonement cannot bring about forgiveness for sins committed against another person until one goes to the person one has hurt and speaks healing words. The end. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like and share. See you in next video.